Hi, Murli. Hi. I think, Murli, it is 10 a.m. CST, and maybe we can get started. I see there are a lot of attendees who are right now joining us. So, in the interest of time, I just want to make sure we start. I want to
Sure.
thank, yeah, I want to thank you first of all, for taking time. I know we're all very busy with a lot of work, especially with your role across your helping your employees, customers across the globe. I know you have to manage your time with multiple time zones. We really thank you for taking time to join us and share some of your insights into how companies are handling these issues with culture, and how they're taking forward. We really thank you for joining us here today, Murli. So um, to get started, Murli, what I wanted to do quickly today is, I hope you can see my screen, Murli.
I can, Venkat. Let's
Okay.
get.
Yeah. So before we get started and get into details, a couple of housekeeping items I wanted to bring it out as we are recording this session. So after this, we will have this recording on our website. So if anyone wants to do a replay and want to get some more understanding, they can go in there. We also have an option for Q&A. So below here, you'll see a Q&A option. So you can, if you have any questions, please feel free to post it there. What we'll try to do is at the end of this session, we'll try to answer all your questions if you have any. In the meanwhile, feel free if you have anything else you want to chat about. There's a chat option also, so please feel free to enter any information that you want to know. So to get started, Murli, what we'll do is I just wanted to just quickly walk you through the agenda and why we are doing this session. I think it's very important that we all understand the importance of culture now. It's always been important in organizations, but the way we handle culture, especially in companies now, has changed. Right? So it's very important that we understand how we change this. So it's very important we do that. To get started, just a brief introduction about myself. I'm the current CEO for Oorwin. I'm based out of Dallas. I manage sales strategy for Oorwin right now. And I'm very excited to have Murli join us. Murli is currently based out of Bangalore. I'll let Murli give his introductions as well.
Thank you, Venkat. Good evening, good afternoon to all of you. I'm part of a large global technology company, have been in this business for about 32 years now. Very, very closely interacting, as you can imagine, in a professional services company with people, employees, teams, and customers. And that's the discussion I'm trying to bring today to this forum as to what we are seeing and what are our experiences with just not our own set of global employees, but also a set of our customers in these times, and how do we actually do this remote working and remote, connect with all.
Very good, very good. Thanks again. A big thank you, Murli, for joining us. We are really excited to hear some of these challenges that you are currently facing. Um, I'm sorry. So we wanted to just, one of the, I know you were talking about, working remote challenges, right? Um, so we, we as an organization itself, it just took us some time just to figure out that, the world is going to change, right? So everyone is starting to work remote. We have to get used to the fact that, this is going to be the new normal. Working at home is going to be, or remote is going to be the new normal. So there have been some challenges that we have seen, across at Oorwin as well, in terms of, tracking productivity, making sure there are no distractions. How do you measure the output? So there have been some challenges. So we want to understand from you, based on your experience, what you have been seeing in the industry. What are some of these challenges that you're facing right now, especially with all your workforce working remote? And we understand you're a global company, you have employees across the globe. So how are you managing all these people, your employees, as well as customers during these times?
Yeah. So thank you, Venkat. I think very important, because I think most of this has caught us unaware, right? And I really liked somebody telling us a couple of days back that I think not only were the individuals unprepared, so were the companies, and so were the countries. So very uniformly, we were all unprepared for a significant transition in the way we kind of interact with each other. And to my mind, the biggest change in terms of working remotely has been the fact that the trust factor which you have of saying, I look at somebody and he's working, he or she is working, and now looking, not being able to see, and then asking whether truly they are working. I think the trust was something which we saw. The customers across us also thinking in a similar manner, in terms of saying, no, I was monitoring them so closely. Can I now monitor them when they are working remotely? So I think the trust was something which always we found was the first thing which came to fore. Having said that, I think it is also very important the fact that how do people react? I mean, for ages now, we have been looking at each other and saying, when I say something and somebody reacts, his facial expression, body language have been so important a part of how we work together that missing that is another challenge actually. Today, it's very, very unemotional kind of a interaction of saying, are you doing? And somebody saying yes or no, right? So the second, really, to my mind, the emotional connect, the non-physical connect, which is happening. Third, I don't believe many of us do an individual work, right? So it's team. How do you get the team to coordinate with each other? I think became a much bigger challenge. And teams which are global in nature, right? I mean, even local teams are working remotely, but global teams, different culture. Can one understand the other culture when they're talking without seeing each other? That again became, I think, a big point of doing. Fourth to me was, how do you therefore communicate, right? We would just talk to somebody, even if it's non-personal, because I'm seeing somebody, my kind of communication was easier. But now the communication has to be far more targeted. And what we realized, and we are realizing over a period of last couple of months, is that communication has to be a lot more personal. So we first decided, like a typical HR would do, let's get to the team and make one call and say that we are here, how are you? Doesn't work, because each one thinks it's for the other. How do you personalize those communication, right? And leads to a very important point, Venkat, I think, about motivating employees.
Right.
What motivates an employee? I mean, having Fridays off, happy hours. How do you do this? Because now they are absolutely segregated. And how
Right.
do you therefore respect their own time? I think it's very important. The distinction between a personal, family, and a professional time has come to really a fore, right? And last of all, measuring output. Very interesting, because we did find in a number of industries, frankly, where we found the productivity suddenly go up because they were working remotely. And this is a study done across, if I'm not mistaken, about 26 industries, out of which we saw majority of them, if you leave manufacturing, which needs you to be physically there, etc., going up. But eventually what we are noticing is, and as economies open, when you can still move around, it became working from home to working for home. So is that productivity drop very important? How do you deal? And given the new normal that this is just not going away, and I think we will move to a lot more remote working, how do you therefore measure output? Some factors which we are seeing very consistently across companies, across sectors. Venkat.
Right. I think that's a very good point. I know. Thanks for all your insights on that. So we we are living that problem, right? So we see that even at our organization, the way we sell, the way we service our customers, the way we even manage our teams internally, it has changed, right? So I think coming to the one of the most important points here today that we wanted to discuss about was culture, right? So we spoke about the problem that is there right now, the problems we are facing. The main reason why we wanted to pick up this topic and talk about culture and why we think it's important is we think culture is the core to what, and we have to figure out how we change our culture as well as an organization. So I know you are a global company. I'm sure you have employees across the globe. You have some. We want to experience in building up culture as well. So we want to get your understanding about where we are with culture in terms of how was it different, 30 years ago compared to how was the transition over the years and where we stand right now. So can you just give us some more insights about culture and some of your feedback on that?
Sure. And I think, Venkat, going back to what I said at the beginning, I think all of these problems, or I wouldn't say problems, but challenges which have emerged, some of them are not new, frankly. A trust, irrespective of whether you're working remotely or otherwise, is still a question which you always come up with. Obviously, over a period of several decades, we have seen that culture change. And of course, it differs region wise, it differs country wise, which is but obvious. But the fact is that we have seen a lot of this emerge, right? These cultures emerge as in, and when we have gone global, right? More and more global, the cultures have differed and the way they have mixed with each other to define one culture for a set of group of people or a set of companies or a company which is operating. So we have seen that evolve largely in terms of how you deal, how do you understand, how do you communicate, right? It's very important as to how you therefore communicate and how do you therefore set these trends. So irrespective of the situation which we are in COVID, I
Right.
think it has been very important to see across the globe, right? I mean, we have had remote working because global companies, global workforce do work remotely.
Correct.
How do you therefore build that culture? And I think two important points which we have learned over the decades and which we, I think, are implementing today, just not in our company, but I can tell you in several large companies which we are now interacting with, talking to them as to what is happening, several large research firms which have come forward and looked at this problem. I think two very defining factors, in my opinion, are the way the leadership and the managers of those companies work, right? The way
Right.
they demonstrate their culture or their ethos and emotional connect to the next levels of employees, or even in this case, the customers. I think that's
Correct.
the biggest takeaway which we have seen has been there. It's nothing new, but I think has got even more reinforced in this manner because when you start looking and a leader talks about your safety first before talking about business, is the culture which gets developed as it goes down. That's, I think, the first foremost defining factor. To me, the second, and has again got emphasized in these times, has been communication. So it is
Right.
communicate, communicate, and communicate, over communicate.
Exactly.
People sitting somewhere remotely, not seeing what is happening, do tend to get that anxiety, fear, capability to start performing lesser. So to me, the second way of how you can define and set that culture going and connect with emotionally connect with the workforce or the customers has been the communication part. And again, I can tell you there are cases where we have seen companies who have been silent, and it's not that they don't want to communicate, but they have thought that it is better and they will kind of do much lesser communication, have actually had a significant problem. And I can tell you that such is the problem, and culturally, if I can say, that we are seeing them performance go down. Very, very absolute connect between these two. And there are several studies, we can share it, but clearly communication today is therefore setting the culture and behavior what the leaders are seeing, and the way it is being communicated are, to my mind, two absolutely critical features of how the culture is developing, the culture is set, and the way you can actually define a culture which is probably a kind of a subjective part.
Correct. Correct. I think that's very important. Yeah, I think these are very good insights, Murli. But a lot of these companies you mentioned as previously, they never used to communicate that very often, right? So I think the people need to understand, the importance of culture and why they need it right now. Because I think more than ever right now, it is need for change, right? So in general, organizations are going through massive transformations. And I'm sure culture is one of the most important aspect that every CEO has in their mind, because now they have to redefine their culture that they previously had into something newer or refine it into with new stuff, right? because it could be in terms of enablement of their employees remotely, or it could be enablement of their customers remotely, suppliers. So the model itself is changing into importance of culture as on every CEO's mind these days is what, based on my discussions, I'm talking to CEOs, they are figuring out and coming out with different options to figure out how they can do transformation as well.
And Venkat, I'd just like to add one more thing. You absolutely said it right. People are just not looking at a communication coming down from a CEO to manager to you. Frankly, what we have found, and interestingly, what we have found is the fact that anything which you do on the social media is now becoming a huge manner in which this is getting communicated. You asked me for a change which is happening. We have seen social media impact getting higher and higher. But
Right.
surprisingly, in these times, we have noticed that a CEO posting in a Twitter or in a LinkedIn and giving some statements or talking about this has caught the attention of a lot of employees and customers and has become, I would say, a very, very critical tool in setting the way you would think and the way your culture is evolving. So I really think the ways of communication are also changing, and social media is as important today as an internal communication or a memo.
Okay. Yes. Yes. I agree with you there. Totally. That is very important, because social media is right now more important, because that is one way to communicate for every leader right now. So even you can take, Elon Musk and all these guys are so much into Twitter, and even our president is on social media. So that's how they are all communicating right now. So I think social media itself is one big way in which people are communicating. So that itself is, if you ask me, that's a big cultural change itself, because that is one way in which leaders have changed the way in which they communicate as well, right? So just moving on. So there's been this one question about culture, right? In every company is, whose job is that, right? One of the most common answers we've been hearing is that's actually HR's job. If you have to build a culture in any company, they think that the role is traditionally a HR's job, right? So we want to get some of your insights and your thought process about, in general, culture, and who should take responsibility for that, and how do you measure this culture in term for any organization?
So Venkat, I think not something new, but has been a point of discussion in the last few years, I would say, and there have been a lot of questions and answers on this. We definitely have seen it moving. And I think a very old saying that a person works for his manager is but very true. And I think large organizations have had this mentor programs, for example, which have nothing to do with HR, but your own colleagues taking over the mentorship, etc., as a movement away from HR. So I think I have no doubt on the fact that what is actually started, I would say, a decade back of moving an HR role to each of the managers who are there, each of the leaders who are there, has absolutely been there, but probably accelerated during these times, especially with a remote kind of working. I think it has become even more critical for each manager or a leader who's out there to actually don this role of an HR. And I'm again, this is not about setting some policies. This is not about saying these are the forms you have to fill out. I think the operational part is what I think is left with HR. And I don't know how many HR professionals here agree with me, but the more and more we are seeing are that global organizations have moved functions which are related to interpersonal kind of transactions which are there, motivational stuff which is there, and the way you kind of build this empathy within your organization largely towards people who interact with each other, right? And in some cases, while I'm saying it is the managers and leaders, in some cases we have seen it's a peer-to-peer also which has come down. So very interesting that in the given times today, for example, what we have decided in the organization today is how do I adopt a buddy, right? And this has become a big program because we have found at some places people are stuck in remote places. They are absolutely alone. They feel quite demotivated in that space. And our endeavor, therefore, has been this HR job, as we call, and whose job is it culturally, is to say, can we have this buddy scheme of linking to one other person in that remote place so that they have a constant dialogue with you. So where does, therefore, the culture to me rest right at that person who has made yourself the buddy, right? So
Correct,
this
correct.
whole concept of moving away from HR started earlier, but I think it is moving to individuals even below the manager level today, in which I would say where you set that context and where you can have a buddies kind of a scheme happening towards this. So very interesting shift. Again, I would say accelerated. I mean, this is unprecedented times
Right.
for us to have people who are remote working but not being able to connect with people are a big emotional and mental stress which we are seeing. And to me, this job of what I would call HR traditionally, not the operational part, but the part where they go to people, I think is significantly moved from people to managers, leaders, and now more closely to their own friends and ecosystem or peers in the organization.
Correct, correct. I think that's a very good point you brought up here, Murli, is that, you know, everyone is a HR, right? So right now you don't need to rely on a HR department as such to build your culture. So every individual themselves need to understand that it's important that when you hire someone on, bring someone on in your team, it is very important to make sure they understand how we as an organization operate and what our culture is, right? So I think it's very important that that communication is passed along to the new hires as well. So I think that's a very important good point that you brought up, that everybody has to play the role of a HR right now and make sure that they incorporate culture into the organization as well, right? Very good. So I'm just going to move on to another, just move on. So we also wanted to discuss a little about the impact of COVID-19, right? So everyone is seeing this to understand from you and get some more insights in terms of what is that impact that you as an organization are seeing, as well as other customers that you are talking to across the globe, because I know customers in different countries are affected in different ways. How is that impacted? How is that impacting their lives in general? And how do you see this as, and how do you think that people will get over this, right? So if you can share some of your insights on the impact, that will help us get a little more understanding.
So I think Venkat, we discussed some of this quite a bit. Very interesting, and I'll take the technology part first. I know maybe the least important in terms of the impact, but we are seeing significant, changes in technology happen. You will not believe the work from home technology solution probably is the biggest seller for most of the technology companies. And uh,
Correct.
and I mean, one interesting statistics around is that Azure probably in the first 3 days of this happening sold out all its capacity, right? So very interesting the fact that a lot of technology which probably was not used, available but not used, has
Right.
now been leveraged very, very effectively, right?
Correct.
And just not for interaction, but a lot of collaboration, which we never knew existed. So very, very interesting that all of these were there, but did we use it? I think we did not use it to the level we could have. And
Correct.
as I said, areas like collaboration between teams, fantastic usage of it, and we are now wondering as to why we did not. So technology has been a great player, fantastic because with all this happening, I have not heard networks going down, for example. So what has stood the test of time probably very surprisingly has been the fact that the network side of thing or the communication part has really, really stood up to this challenge. So, having said that, that's a positive side of what I see, and a positive side of having adopted the technology. The capability to change has become very, very high, right? So, people not adopting to that change earlier today, by de facto, are saying that that is agreeable. In fact, we
Correct.
have heard companies today announce that post COVID, they would actually continue with this remote working policy. So they've announced it even before the lockdown has happened. So what does it indicate to me? I
Right.
think the fact that COVID has made us change the normal, right, is a very, very significant part of what we are looking. And it is just not the fact that somebody is sitting remote and working. That's not what I'm talking about. It has changed the way you can think, the way you can focus, right? I mean, how do you focus and bring something out in doing? I think
Right.
it has also helped in another aspect of ours, which we are seeing fantastically work, is the planning part of it. I
Right.
sincerely believe the kind of planning which has gone in and done has improved a lot of us in this aspect. Having
Correct.
put that, I would, these are things which are a little tangible, and therefore you can measure what is it, how can you measure an outcome, etc. The most interesting thing to me has been the fact that for decades now we have been talking about human change, change management, organization change management. What we are seeing very importantly is the fact that between the last 2 months to now, the fact that people are ready to adopt a very significantly different solution in whatever manner has become a reality. So the whole concept of saying people are used to doing it in a certain manner, the process, or people are used to interacting in a certain manner, people are used to working in technologies in a certain manner,
Right.
has really undergone a change. And I can tell you the impact and the outcome which we are seeing starting to happen, the way companies are taking decision, the way we are able to change, and employees and customers accepting that fact and coming forward and doing, has been phenomenal. And I think to us, uh, more than what we have gone through, and it's really really sad and the way it has happened, we are definitely seeing a sets of opportunity there, both from the fact that businesses will significantly change and change positively because they have now seen that capability suddenly. We will see the employees and the customers absolutely, endorse that change, and we will see a set of technologies either emerged or emerging, which will make a very very significant difference in the way business will be done, both from a cost and risk basis, and the way business will be taken to the end customer.
Perfect. Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you. I think that has changed a lot. Let me just give you a little insight about what we as an organization have done too, right? So we at Oorwin, our primary focus has always been enablement of sales, recruitment, as well as HR. So most of the work that our platform is used by sales executives, recruiters, as well as human resources across the globe. Currently, we are servicing a lot of customers in US, India, UK, Singapore. Traditionally, their approach was lot of our customers in India were used to the old style of handing out a paper, do a signature, send an email out with offer letters. But what they've seen a huge value change is right now is digital, right? So everything is becoming digital now. Even any communication that we do with that they do HRs do with employees have gone digital now. So they send their offer letters, they send any document that they need for signature through digitally. So we've built our own internal digital capability. So things have changed in terms of technology. We see a huge adoption in terms of products as well, because they need to understand that newer products are available and they need to start moving into those, so that this impact of COVID-19 is felt across. So we as an organization are also making sure we are supporting our customers during these journeys and on different departments as well. um, Another important impact is, personally, I'll tell you, I've always been on the road, and being at home this many days is something new for me, and I've never done this before. I actually started cooking, which I've never done before. So there is an impact of COVID-19 which made me cook. So that is also a big change. Personally, I see it. Um, but in general, technology for sure, uh, is a big transformation that's going on, and we see that in all areas. I'm just going to move on to the next one. So I think this is a topic that we were talking earlier, Murli, about trust and relationship, right? So now that all employees are remote, uh, we want to understand, how do you make sure that you're building trust and relationship with your employees who are, spread across the globe? What are some of these strategies that you're taking right now to make sure that you're keeping them engaged, connected? One of that you brought up earlier was one-to-one connection, right? So what other strategies that you are currently putting in place to make sure that you're able to build trust and relationships?
Very important one, Venkat, probably the most important one as I see, because in times such as this is where most of the trust issues, crop up because you're not even seeing each other. To my
Correct.
mind, the three things which we have at least tried following uh, is one is a clear strategy and a consistent strategy, right? So the consistent part is very important. You can't seem to every second day because of COVID or any other parts come up and say that I'm changing something, right? And I'm changing without a valid reason, but you need to be consistent. That is the first thing which I think builds the trust. The second is how you communicate that on to all the stakeholders and employees definitely, and to your other stakeholders. It could be the board members or it could be your customers. Doesn't make a difference. How do you communicate? And these are times where, believe me, uh, communicating communicating more is preferable than less. As I said, we have seen, and there are studies available where the lesser the communication, the companies have struggled. So I think it is how you therefore go back and communicate what you're saying is what you're doing, your strategy. How does it, if at all there is a change and lack of consistency, why, and explain it is very, very important. And the method and the ways of communication are to be very, very wide. I mean, you cannot, but we are about 130, 40,000 employees globally. It is extremely difficult, therefore, as to how do I influence each of them as much as we do try doing that. So it is important, therefore, use methods and every method of communication, including the social media, right? That's the second thing in my work. And the third thing, which I think is most important, and we have tried doing it in a number of manner, is empathy. How do you reach out and connect empathetically to these set of, at least your set and group of people and so on and so forth, so that they recognize you as a trusted companion rather than you coming in trying to give them and tell them what to do, right? And that is applicable even to a customer, applicable to a state, any board member, etc. But that is something which is so important for them to say you are there, not just professionally, but also as a personal friend there if there is something needed during these times. I think that are three, at least, mantras we have followed to say that we need to keep this going across to gain the trust.
Very good. Those are very nice points that you brought up, Murli. But here's the question that I have wanted to ask you is, so how do you engage with all your employees and make sure that you're getting the feedback, and how do you act upon the feedback from your employees?
So Venkat, as I said, you're a very relevant question. There are a number of channels which I think we have opened up, and we have, I can tell you a number of examples, other examples where people have really opened up. The question we have said, the first foremost thing we have made everybody realize is they are capable of reaching out to the highest level, including the CEO. In these times, there is nothing like a stupid question. There is nothing like a question you should not ask beyond your reporting. So the lines of communication for what we have said is right open. And how do you do that actually? So how do you give them that belief that they have kind of end-to-end capability to reach out in any circumstances, get them clarified if they have any kind of issues? How do they do that?
Right.
To me, one of the most important things what we have done, and believe me, this is a learning across several of our customer companies also, has been the fact that how do you enable them? So we have done several things here. One, we have created a set of platforms for them, very easy to do. These are not very difficult ones to do, but we have created a set of platforms where that interaction has become high.
Right, right, right.
So for examples, we have got Microsoft Teams going now. And what we tend to do is connect with these people, not on a professional level, just on a professional level. And I was giving you this example earlier. For example, right now we have from in the evening, 9 to 10 in the evening, we have a session which talks about a lot of aspects. Health, for example, it talks about how's the economy doing somewhere. It talks about technology. It talks about what is the stress people are going through and how can they come out of some of the, so it talks of a wide ranging topics where the first half an hour we do bring in, illuminate from the industry, we bring in all of those. But the interesting part, Venkat, is we actually ask them in the next 15 minutes, use something called the Kahoot. I don't know if you're aware, but another small app which helps you to play some games. So they start getting involved before we give them a half an hour to start discussing that. Another example of how we have been able to do. The second one, which we are now doing, is that we actually go in and we are starting to do a yoga session across the globe. And I'm telling you, it's very interesting. We are asking all of them to turn on their cameras, come in and start doing yoga sessions across the globe, so that and done, of course, with some trainer, though you don't need to be an expert, but you need. So the point I'm trying to make is the fact that feedback is not just on a written saying, look, what is this happening? Is the program going right? Professionally, you have a number of elements which you can take and do. What we are trying now to do is to go a little away from that and kind of draw them into elements which are not there, would have been there. We could have done that face to face, but in the remote working, we are trying to draw them through these elements, through these platforms, through these applications, to make sure that they get far, far more connected, and they can therefore express themselves better, just not on the professional front, but on the non-professional front. I think, to me, when you say feedback, to me, a feedback is something which is explicitly stated, but some which never gets stated. And that's the dangerous part. And that's what we are trying to address doing that. Just some examples.
Yes, yes. Also, to add to that, Murli, one other thing that I wanted to understand is previously, we had all employees in the office, right? So we could recognize who was working more, or not just work in terms of contribution, in terms of performance, or in terms of something contributing to the organization. There was a lot of recognition and events and appreciation that used to happen, right? We had annual events, we had, monthly events. So there were a lot of avenues in which you could appreciate. But what are new avenues that you're looking at? So how do you appreciate your employees and make sure if they are outperforming, or you want to appreciate, what are avenues that you are currently using to appreciate them right now?
Very interesting, and I can tell you a lot of that is still getting evolved, because this has been a thought across companies. For example, we are having virtual happy hours with our clients. So we would do that going out physically, but now we are having that.
Have you gone here on this side and then
that is correct. Yes. So that is one part. But having said that, gaming is another thing which we have actually built up and saying, can we have joint gaming sessions? And you know that in the net you can connect and do some of the stuff. But how do you therefore go back and appreciate? So we have quickly built a platform, or I can say an app, where we are actually distributing these points to these people, saying, in an environment such as this, when you think out of the box and you contribute out of the box. And I know this measurement is something which we spoke about earlier. How do we measure? Do we measure daily? Do we measure on milestones, etc.? But what we are now seeing is, if we need to make sure that people understand and can actually contribute, what is that out of box thinking which makes a difference? So just as an example, we had another day, one of our employees come up and say that they had developed an app which actually warns you when you get to 2 feet of another person. So social distancing done on his own. If he says you can use a phone to do this, and I know there are a number of people out there with Google, Apples trying to do this, and he had built this app, an out of box thinking, not necessarily on the project. So we actually created what we called the Kudos platform, and therefore have started giving them points. And what does this points do? As and when it opens, this points convert to a set of money which he has, which he can go to and buy from an Amazon or whatever it is. So what we are trying to do now is, one, recognize an out of box behavior, because that sets an excellent example for a set of people, right? It's just not measuring a day-to-day job, which becomes a little tedious anyway. We are doing that, but one who thinks beyond, one who has a larger impact on the work, on the society, or on the customer side. We are looking at those examples, and we are trying to, in various ways, build. Of course, the recognition part is the most important. In all of these virtual, let's say a happy hour or a virtual things, sessions which we have, these are the most recognized names which come up in the video session, right? So they are the ones who are commemorated. In fact, the other day we had the top 10 come to a call with our CEO across a set of maybe 1,000 plus participants, and were commended by the CEO. But both, so a monetary part and a non-monetary part, very fast recognition, very agile, not waiting till everything is over. The moment somebody has come up with an idea, for example, we recognize him the next day. And that, I think, is the way, setting a trend for everybody to say, look, you are not out there not getting recognized.
I think that's a very interesting point, Murli, is you don't have to wait to reward, right? So because typical, traditional process was you have these annual events or monthly events to recognize someone and award them. But that is going away. Your award is as soon as somebody does a good job, you just award them, right? So I think that itself gives a lot of confidence for employees as well as they grow, is, they have that feeling that they can get rewarded, right? If they're doing a great work. So that's a very good, insight that, I think companies can start adopting. So I'm just going to move on. I'm just going to move on to the next slides. I know we are on time. Just wanted to make sure. Other important aspect, especially now, previously, what organizations would do is invest heavily into an employee experience, right? They would have fancy offices, break rooms and coffee and, different things. But now more than ever, since employees are remote, how can they make sure that they're able to create great employee experience? So what are some of these channels and avenues that companies are doing to make sure that employees are also still being having a very good experience in their day-to-day work life?
Yeah, Venkat. So some of them we already spoke, and I agree with what we have put there. I think the video experience is absolutely critical. I think the face-to-face, we kind of forgot. Maybe the calls made it easier for us to just pick up a phone and do. We definitely find a set of calls happening with all of them on videos, and we have tried this several times. Exchanging views is increasing, and good learning from, let's say, some of the college studies which are happening, right, where they have taken this part and started doing that, involving writing on a board which is visible to all, doing presentations. A great example where there is so much of involvement which is there. So when you start seeing, so that is definitely a very critical one which is there. But I think one of the other interesting thing which I wanted to mention, Venkat, is, in some ways we are seeing, because of them being at home, that the family now is a part of the work environment, right? And to us, this is a great realization. And we have had a number of these cases where they're on a video and you find the family moving behind, etc. Right. What we have encouraged is, it's not an embarrassing movement, frankly. It is not. It is an inclusive movement, is what I would call, is the way we have defined. In a lot of cases, we try bringing that together in occasions. But the point I'm trying to again make is the fact that, one, make the employee extremely comfortable in this environment. That is, I think, the most important thing, as much as he feels. Make him very inclusive of what he's doing, which is the video experience, and make it clear that the family, in a lot of ways, is a support today, and that is a part of what you are doing. It is not an exclusion, or it's not an intrusion, right? So 2 or 3 things which I thought was very, very important. And the second, which I said earlier, but I will keep repeating it, is the fact that, please do not think, because earlier you would walk into a room, probably the first 10 minutes would go in pleasantries and exchange, and that would set a trend in any meeting. I don't think that happens today. You start a meeting and you're there in the agenda and start. How do you build that? And that, to me, is where we are trying to get this happy hours going, or get into those, or a gaming set of things, gaming going. These are things where you build that kind of an experience to say, while you are working, these are the type of experience, and there's still a touch point which is informal and just not formal.
Right. I think that's great, right? I think very important is the gaming option, right? So people are looking for gaming options on when you start any meeting, right? How do you gamify it? Because there are a lot of platforms that I've seen as even social platforms, as gamification is becoming very important. So in terms of employee experience, we just to give you a little more background about Oorwin and where we stand in terms of employee experience, we've been putting a lot of effort into this, and what we've realized is, especially most of our customers employees are all remote. We have put together a lot of work into creating a great experience for their employees, right? What is coming out in the next versions for us is, that we are creating employee central portals with a lot of gamification, engagement activities that are going to help them out to be more connected to the organization. So this is not something that customers were really that into, maybe a couple of years ago, but this is one of the biggest need for customers now, is gamification inside the system, so that they can be connected and be engaged as well. So I think our main thing is, we have got a very good employee portal where employees can log in and be connected with the organization, and organizational communications can happen there as well. So that is one way that we are seeing customers also be connected. But great ideas from you, Murli, is gamification at the start to keep them engaged. I think those are some of these important aspects that employees would love to get on a meeting. Uh, Believe me, 10 years ago, getting on a video call was a big deal. And I wasn't comfortable, right? I don't think we were like, oh, video call, no, let's just do it on phone. But now video call has become the new norm. Everyone has to be on a video, and everyone is talking on a video right now, right? So again, I think that, Murli, that those are great insights. I think we have some questions that are coming up. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A box. We will respond back to them after all these slides. Okay. I'm just moving on. Oh. Okay. So I think you probably touched on this next topic about employee engagement before, but for what, Murli, again, the topic of discussion is, it is right now more important than ever to keep an employee engaged, right? We want to know, based on, I know one of them were video, phone calls, some of these employee engagement activities that you're currently doing, and also how are customers doing across the globe? Since you are seeing customers across the globe, every country has their own way of engaging, right? Can you just shed light into some of these insights and how you're seeing customers being engaged as well?
I think, Venkat, very interestingly, and we spoke a lot on this, but very interestingly, one of the things which I think most of our customers are doing, and most of our good customers are doing, if I can say that way, have been the fact that more than the concern on their work, their ability to connect on the level of their health and safety, I think has been the first, I would say, engagement which has happened to the best of our customers, which I see. I think their whole first set of interactions with their employees and has been around saying, how do they provide safety? How do they provide any assistance? And we have had occasions, our own, in fact, globally. For example, in Spain, we had several of our employees actually get into COVID. How do we therefore provide support, just not to them during these times, but also to their families, right? That assurance and engagement to me was probably the most outstanding feature of the best customers and what we did in terms of saying, look, business can wait. I mean, not something which you tend to hear, in normal times, right? So I think the first engagement, in my opinion, and largely was around really looking at their employees' welfare rather than looking at a business side of it. So that kind of set the tone for that engagement in doing so. The second was therefore to see, while some of them were not well, unfortunately, and how do you support them and their family? The second was, people are well, but how do you get them connected? How do you not make them feel alone? A lot of them felt that way, right? Because they were stuck in some places doing that work. And how do you therefore get that connect going with them, right? That's the second one which we felt. And I have to appreciate that in some cases, I can tell you, again, taking an example of Spain and Italy, we had some of our largest of customers work jointly with us. Some, again, you in a normal time, maybe that's a hands-off relation, but here we were seeing that both of us were working in the same frequency to say, look, we have got this going, and can we kind of, whether it's your or our employee, doesn't make a difference, and how do we therefore motivate? So we have held programs with some of our large customers globally in terms of from their employee and our employees jointly together, and some of the measures which I said which we took. So that was the second, to make them feel they are well connected in doing so. And the third, of course, we spoke a number of them. Yes, I mean, how do I make it more and more personal as we go along? Yes, there, if we are 120,000 and there are customers of our large beverages manufacturing customer who has more than 250,000 employees globally, how do you therefore get more and more personal has been a lot of discussions which we have had at industry boards, for example, a lot of analysts researching into this, saying while we are doing a generic communication at first, we are seeing it become more and more. So for example, today, if there is a message which needs to go down, we are saying, should the CEO write to everybody, or should he write maybe the message to be taken by individually by us to the next level? That's
Correct.
where we are debating on making it more personalized. And I think this has come from the customer experience context in a normal digital environment where you say, make it more personalized. We are making it more and more personalized, the message. And that, I think, is the third level of engagement which we are doing with thing. And that, as I said, the fourth is very clear. Can I do a one-to-one buddy scheme which makes it more relevant for them to talk? Could be a manager, could be a peer, doesn't make a difference, but makes them available to one another. And if there is a crisis, there is somebody to take care. So I think set of things to make each individual feel required at that moment and a part of the family. I think I can't put it better than that as to how we have tried that engagement, employee engagement, and that is what we are driving at. To my mind, clearly in the next normal. I mean, it is not that because we did this and COVID goes away, everything will come to normal. Our belief, it has changed the world and changed the world the way we operate, right? And I sincerely believe this model will continue.
Right.
Obviously, percentages may differ here and there, but since this model will continue, the fact that whatever we are doing and learning now to do better will become the new normal.
Correct. Yeah. I think that's very good point that you brought up, Murli, was the fact that even customers understand that, even though you're not there, so we as services companies are not their employees, but they still are looking upon us as their employees and make sure health and safety is of the highest priority. So I think it's a very important point that you brought up, is even though, end of the day, we are all people, humans, and, if it's my employee, not my employee, but giving them priority is very important. So keeping that engagement going on is very important as well. So again, thanks for those insights. And I hope everyone is safe in Italy and Spain right now and I hope they're all recovering back, whoever got affected. So I'm just going to move on. So there's one question that everyone is talking about is, we've been talking for the last hour about, culture, right? So where do we start? How do I start and make sure that culture is something that I start putting into my organization? So we would want to get some insights about, and your thought process about where do we start and how do we make sure that employees and we start in our organization, how do we embrace this new remote culture as such, if you may say?
No, absolutely. And Venkat, as I said, we have no doubt whether it is a services company, whether it is at the other extreme where it's manufacturing, for example. And we have been part of some of these studies done by some big analyst firms, etc., to really look at what is the next normal, right? And a lot of discussion on whether it will go back to where we started post this thing, COVID going away. Our belief is not. We have, to our minds, we have changed quite a permanent way. And therefore, to me, it is a great experience to actually start building this part. You would have, remote working in different flavors. You would have this technology coming up, applied in different manner of doing things, right? So all of those is absolutely taking towards a new normal. And to do, I would say the start for that is clearly understanding one's own, the stakeholder very, very clearly. To me, if you don't understand what is your employee set, And I mean, believe me, while it looks like a very standard statement, we do not.
Right.
In the large cases, we start understanding in these circumstances what the set of employees do we have? How do we dissect those employees as we would dissect a market, as we would dissect the set of customers we have? How do we dissect that employee base to understand them better? And having done that, dissecting, how do we therefore start building those organization interventions, if I can say, in terms of making sure that we can implement some of these changed scenarios and make them change, right? So that's, to my mind, the first thought of working. And while I say employees, I would say stakeholders. Would
Right.
you make a board presentation remotely? Now you are, and would you continue making? And how do you therefore be effective in making those decisions, right? How do you look at the board members, and then look at how do you influence each of them? Goes to same to employees, goes the same to the customer. So that, I think, is very more, I would say it's far more important today to dissect, understand those clusters, and see what interventions to the clusters are needed. I think that is first. The
Correct.
second, and I keep repeating that, strategy and consistency on the strategy has to be a very critical one. Earlier, we probably were conscious that we had, and sometimes a change in strategy may have gone unnoticed. We were excited about it, may not have been communicated to the level to all
Right.
stakeholders. Today, I think it is but default. If you don't, you're done. So you have to look at that consistency, to communicate that, build a
Right.
communication strategy. I think it's the most important, irrespective of what is there. I think the communication strategy, and I would again repeat, it is just not internal, external, it is also the social media, is in sharpest focus today. And I think the better companies, and I know there you will notice on the net today, the better companies are the ones who are out there messaging, and the message to their employees is just not with their employees. It goes to other set of stakeholders who are watching very carefully as to how they're doing. So get your strategy on communication absolutely clear and start implementing that. And I think, to me, the last is very important. Clearly connect with the stakeholders a lot more. So
Right.
while you communicate, I think it is very important to start connecting them. Use technology, leverage technology amply. I think the technology has stood the test of time, and has been great. There are set of things available today in the, if you go out, which can help you to do all of what I said earlier, absolutely clearly. So leverage technology, but make it more personalized. And as and when you get a lot more personalized, as we would do with a customer or an end user, I think that is what is going to make a difference from start to where you want to be.
Agree. I think what you brought up is a very good point right now, right? So I think engagement, communication, having a communication strategy is very important for every organization, no matter what size you are, because you need to figure out, even if you're a 2-employee company, how do you communicate with your other employee, and how often do you communicate? Even if you have 100,000 employees. So I think every organization should start coming up with a communication strategy as such. So Murli, in interest of time right now, I know we just have a few minutes left, but there are around few questions that people have asked, and I wanted to bring them up before we get to close this. So one of the questions that someone brought up is here is, how are you guys as a larger organization managing your partners, and how are you making sure you're keeping them impact right now?
So, Venkat, not being very specific to our company, I would defer that. But frankly, what we have seen is a lot of companies started with a very individual viewpoint, and we are seeing that in a larger behavior, right? The countries, if you notice the countries, a lot of individualistic behavior is what we have seen. However,
Correct.
over the last, I think, a few weeks, because this really is weeks which we are talking about now, there is a clear understanding that the impact is pretty much across. I cannot say that I open a part of the economy and I run the supply chain. The supply
Correct.
chain is actually till the last mile, right? So you cannot open parts of it and say 90% open and the 10% is not open. Doesn't work.
Correct.
Very similar is the fact that I think the realization, at least for companies across, and I can tell you, this is absolutely something which we are observing without fail. In the
Right.
last month or so, I can tell you the fact that not distinguishing, I spoke about working with some companies with the employee,
Right.
not distinguishing really between a partner and our own companies has been, I think, the learning, and what I think a lot of companies are now leveraging. And we are
Okay.
doing a lot with it. We are actually in our own efforts bringing the partners in, asking the partners to kind of interact with us. We are interacting with the partner companies and their employees, etc.
Right.
Now, again, I would only go back to give that example of a supply chain part opening and thinking we are done because I have addressed my company, uh,
Correct.
is not. And that's the realization. I think everybody started a little selfish in terms of their own, have
Right.
realized very, very fast that that's not the way to look at a connected economy.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, I totally agree. Other question, Murli, is you had mentioned earlier about a platform that you were using to gamify your employees, right? So what was the name? I mean, they were asking what was the platform that you're using?
So there are a number of them which we use, some which we have, but we do use applications like Kahoot. I don't know if you have had a chance to see. Very, very interesting app, because you actually can play a lot of games, etc., on that, and kind of integrate a set of people around that. I mean, those are some of the apps which we have used. Some of the apps we have built, and interestingly, the answer to that question, Venkat, is that what would have taken us normally maybe a 6 to 8 months to build, we have been able to build in 2 to 3 weeks. Some of these
Okay.
collaborative platforms where each one of us can come. Of course, there are others which we use for collaborations, which are pretty much like the Zoom. We heavily tend to use
Correct.
Teams and the rest of it. There are a number of them, and I can actually circulate it later, where we have, and there are a number of them in the startup industry actually, which have
Sure.
been very, very useful in terms of collaboration, gaming, if I can say, in both these, as well as, of course, very serious professional work.
Correct. Correct. I think so. The next question that they wanted to ask is, apart from gamification, any other activity can be conducted to engage employees? In terms of, we spoke about engagement. Gamification was one aspect, and also the other question they're asking is, are there any free sites that you can use to engage your employees? In terms of free sites, I can just jump in, but there are a lot of platforms. See, I don't think there is one. I think to what Murli had mentioned earlier, right? To keep an employee engaged, you don't need to install a new software or buy a new software. I think it can be as simple as sending out an email or frequent communication or social media or having these frequent meetings. So that those are ideal ways of keeping them engaged. In terms of, there are platforms out there there are engagement platforms, but they usually sit on top of some other platforms to target your employees as such. So but I don't see that there are any free sites that we would know, that I don't know, Murli, but do you know any free sites that are used to engage employees?
No, there are. It's about depends on the scale and size, if I can say, Venkat. And happy to share that with this forum later on. I will definitely give you the names of doing that. But it has its own limitations. I don't know of a gamification where you can do in a free platform that also
Right.
has some limitations in terms of how you can actually do.
Okay.
But that apart, I think there are enough platforms and gamification. The only thing the other I quickly answer is there something else you do? Yes, I don't know. It makes sense. Another example where we have done is this is the time we have found that we can actually concentrate more on the innovation side. Doesn't make a difference whether it's professional services or a manufacturing firm. And this has been pretty well experimented, I can tell you, where we have set a target for a set of innovations which people can do. And I spoke about an app just now. People have actually used a group of set of people or a group of employees have got together as teams and actually come up and done those innovations, which are very relevant to the industries which we are in, right? Or our customer industries, which I see them doing. So another one very good advantage of combining and taking, just not a gamification, but a little more serious, but a very, very highly value adding thing. So there are other interventions, if I can call, which has been going on. These are not just two, these are just the examples of those.
Okay. I know, Murli, we are on time right now, so I want to really thank you, Murli, for taking time in your busy schedule to give us all your insights in terms of culture. The most important thing is communication. So I think if you ask me what I've learned today, I think the most important thing is, communication is the most important thing, right? So if you have to build your culture, you have to, the most important thing is, having one-on-one discussions with your employees is very important. Keeping engaged, social media, new ways of communication are the highest priority. um, and because everyone is remote, we want to keep them connected as well, and back to the organization. So again, we want to thanks a lot, Murli. Thank you for all your insights. We would really, there's been so much information that you have provided us, and thanks for all that. And we look forward to hearing from you. Even on social media, we'll follow you and make sure that we look for more insights from you as well. Again, thanks for taking time to join us, and appreciate all
Thank
the.
you, Venkat. Thank you, all of you. Have a good day. Be safe and be healthy.
Sure. Thanks everyone. Thank you.